The death of skill in Overwatch. What a clickbait title for something that is honestly not that complicated of an issue. As most of you probably know by now, there's been a lot of buzz created around Lucio recently. While I'm going to come out and say that I think a lot of the complaints were very placebo driven, it is something that I too found concerning initially, and I still kind of do. For everyone not aware, I'm going to try to get you up to speed. A recent PTR update accidentally changed the way momentum worked in the game to fix an issue where Mercy players would unintentionally bunny hop, and by that often get themselves into situations that they didn't mean to. Something that was initially confirmed to be a bug by Jeff Kaplan later did make it onto the live servers with the Halloween Terror event. Or at least so we thought. Geoff Goodman later confirmed that the removal of their scroll wheel bind for jump was intentional, and the bug that resulted in using that keybind on Lucio was removed as well. What bug am I even talking about here? Well, we're talking about something that was later classified as an exploit by the development team, allowing players to accumulate ridiculous amounts of speed on a single wall jump. As you probably know, chaining wall jumps allows Lucio to stack speed boosts up to a certain maximum. What the scroll wheel bind supposedly did was allowing players to fool the game into thinking that they were going through multiple actions at once. That means the game thought that the player in question was chaining mini jumps in very quick succession, allowing them to get an instant boost in speed that was otherwise impossible. Now, what is worth mentioning is that this was not a simple plug and play solution unless you were using a script of some sort. I was trying the scroll wheel bind as recommended by one of my friends and just couldn't ever get used to it while failing to perform rollouts the way he did. Another friend did decide to keep that bind but also did not manage to do the same moves initially, meaning that it is not something that instantly makes you a pro Lucio. There is some sort of learning curve involved. So why did this suddenly turn out to be a problem? In a time where the stigmatization of nobody wants to play support is very common in the community, the developers suddenly decide to effectively nerf one of the supports in a way that nobody complained about in the first place? Argument sides of the rollout community was that, while nice to have, these moves rarely ever had any game-changing impact on the outcome of a match. It was just a more fun way of playing Lucio. Naturally, we can argue against that, highlighting even a clip I used myself very recently of a 4500 rated Lucio player showing that he could reach the capture point just barely in time to trigger overtime, a feat that otherwise on any other hero or with any other ability would have been impossible. Fact is that effective rollouts, which is the act of going really fast by chaining wall jumps, or wall skimming as is referred to, did have an impact on the matches. Players could get unexpected environmental kills from angles that would have otherwise been impossible, reaching objectives faster than any other hero in the game, and diving in a way that was unique to Lucio. Rumor says that the reason this happened in the first place, when again nobody really complained about it, was because during the Contenders tournament during the scrimming phase, just shortly before the playoffs, Blizzard saw how some players on the 144 tick LAN specific servers would get to absolutely ridiculous speeds and classified it as a clear exploit. Obviously, Lucio players are arguing against the classification of this as an exploit. They claim that rollouts are not the result of a simulated button spam that fools the game into creating multiple actions with one, nor are macros that repeat the same action within the fraction of a second the core of the practice. The way wall skimming works, to my understanding, is hitting the jump key in the exact moment you hit the wall, and same goes for bunny hopping when doing it on the ground. Both of these methods have the same purpose in the game, to maintain momentum. Not an exploit, but a deliberate design decision sides of the development team. In addition to that, jumping off of a wall would give Lucio a speed boost which he could stack by repeating the action. Binding jump to scroll wheel allowed the player to more easily find the window in which they are supposed to be pressing jump, which with the repeated action of a mouse wheel is easier than with the bulky spacebar. I, for example, have my jump button bound to my right click because it has a shorter actuation time compared to my keyboard spacebar, even though I'm using Roma G switches which are known for a very short actuation. The entire point is essentially to compensate for the refresh rate of the server versus the player, which makes predicting the perfect time to jump very difficult by finding the easiest way of actuating the desired button to do it as accurately as possible. So why does all this matter in our discussion surrounding the supposed death of skill in Overwatch? Well, the usage of this extra speed boost was not exclusive to rollouts, which are often seen as very gimmicky. Many Lucio players incorporated it into their playstyles for all sorts of movements in every aspect of the game. Those who could do it reliably would show very obvious superiority against those who don't. Naturally, the removal of this would mean that players are no longer able to play Lucio as the hyper-mobile character that they loved to play previously, and it also means that Lucio players across the board will be more difficult to distinguish. Incorporating this into your playstyle does not just mean that you go really fast and get easy kills on unsuspecting targets, because unlike the problems that Mercy players had when accidentally bunny hopping, Lucio players who were not in full control would often perform worse than those who refuse to roll out at all and instead stay close to their team. Blizzard seemingly acknowledged this issue and just just now, at least at the time of working on the script, rolled out a patch on the PTR that effectively makes Lucio feel faster altogether. For some reason they refused to give us any patch notes for a while now, so I can't tell you what changed exactly. Just like last time when I talked about the issue, as is the nature of an upload schedule and a certain amount of production time, I would appreciate if those of you who have more up-to-date information on this could leave a comment down below so I can pin it once again. The big problem that arises with a change like this is that now pretty much anyone can do what previously only the best players could do. And that just doesn't feel right. If you compare me to Echoflex for example, there are very clear differences between our Lucio playstyles. He is very mobile and has a lot of control of his character's mobility, while I am largely ground based and prefer to stick to my team to dedicate myself to peeling, speed boosting and amping up heals. In every sense, I was the inferior Lucio player due to my lack of control of not only Lucio's mobility, but also the subsequent lack of map control that came with me deciding to not leave the comfort of my team's formation. Needless to say that there is a difference between just going really fast and the way you use your mobility. Only because speeding up is now easier does not mean that everyone will be able to do sick rollouts and control the pace of the battle the way an experienced Lucio player would. But it does water down the differences between a variety of Lucio players in varying skill levels. There are a few ways of approaching the idea of fairness. For this I'm going to reference World of Warcraft and its, I believe it was called, reforging mechanic. Reforging allow players to change specific stats on their gear to fit their playstyle. Some would prefer more critical chance, others would rather have their character swing a little faster, etc. They only affected secondary stats and thus were not creating huge power gaps, it was more about min-maxing. Now the way Blizzard approached the idea of min-maxing in this case was that they removed reforging entirely, reason being that it was frustrating to have to go through a number of modifications including reforging to have a new item be effectively usable to the player at all. What was meant to be min-maxing and customization turned out to be an attunement of sort that made your character feel incomplete if you did not participate in it. And while another team is working on Overwatch, the philosophy seems to be similar. Any beneficial animation cancel is being removed from the game with the excuse of wanting to have everyone on a level playing field. And that is kind of the foundation of Overwatch. The reason we're not getting any skins that largely change the shape of our characters with cool costumes is because the devs want us to be able to look at any hero in the game and know immediately what they can do. That's why they all are uniquely shaped. Overwatch does not allow for a whole lot of customization or alteration in playstyle whatsoever because of that. Sure, you're gonna have your Genji players that are a bit more aggressive than others and so on, but they all largely do the exact same thing in more or less the exact same fashion. Obviously, players are always looking to improve and they always try to get an edge against their opponents. That's what made animation cancel techniques so popular before they were removed. The one thing that would differentiate a mediocre player from a good one, the 1% bonus in effectiveness that in the long run could help them come out on top. However, there is a difference in the way min-maxing works. In the case of reforging and WoW, it was but a matter of looking up on Google which stats are the most beneficial on your current class and spec, and changing the stats accordingly became a chore. It was an attunement more than a display of skill. Same thing can be argued for some animation cancel techniques where once you looked up a video or something along those lines that show how it works, it will merely even out the odds with those who are also watching that video. But animation cancels often have a skill element involved, which is perfect timing, and the same thing applies to Lucio. You don't just hit melee while reloading, you look for the right time to melee to actually get a better result than not doing it. And you don't just go really fast and somehow automatically win games by that. You time your wall skips perfectly to learn how to utilize your new level of mobility. I'm really not happy with the devs taking out every last thing in the game that could be a differentiating factor that will clearly distinguish players in their levels of proficiency. It just makes the game feel so washed out. Everyone is the same and it almost feels pointless to spend your time trying to get really good on your favorite hero because you realize that beyond the mechanical act of aiming, tracking or something along the lines, and the way you position yourself and use your abilities, everyone looks exactly the same to your average player. Most people can't even differentiate a player with poor positioning from one who positions themselves really well. They just see how and if you shoot people. There is nothing that makes viewers go, wow, I don't see other Genji players do that anymore. They all jump around, they all spam right click and dash into low health targets and eventually use their Dragon Blade to annihilate the entirety of the enemy team. There is barely anything that could be constituted as smart or advanced use of your abilities. There's either the wrong or the right way of using them, and that's just so insanely boring. But is it an inherent part of the core gameplay experience of Overwatch? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, at the end of the day, it's more about team play than individual performance, at least in the basic idea of Overwatch. Of course, we always feel good about ourselves when we mastered a new character and do really well to an extent where we almost feel like we don't even need anyone to help us win, but I can see how possibly someone could think of that as a deterrence to team play. Lucio players who are always out and about away from their team play for themselves and their own benefit benefit rather than the benefit of the team. The Lucio players who are capable of pulling off these insane moves while not neglecting their teams are usually those who rise to the top. When Lucio 2.0 was introduced, the concern was that players would use his new mobility to just go out and do exactly that rather than being a team player. It's not just about whether or not the player who plays selfishly will reach a high rating, it's also about whether or not they contribute to a well-rounded team in any elo they play in. If a Platinum player was asked about whether or not it made them feel better that this Lucio player on their team that never once gave them a speed boost would never reach Grandmaster, do you think they would care? They'd rather be playing with a Lucio in Platinum that dedicates themselves to the team. And I guess that could be what Blizzard is trying to achieve. I mean, on one side, I loved watching high-level Lucio play in the vein of insane rollouts and mad map control. It's very exciting to watch. On the other hand, we all complain about players who don't play with their teams, so I can't see why they would try to incentivize a gameplay style that does exactly that, almost forcing players to be part of a team rather than a one-man army. What I cannot wrap my head around is the removal of several animation cancel techniques. Unlike the extra speed boost, I don't see these giving players a massive edge. The argument that they want a level playing field just doesn't hold up for me because it does not make that much of a difference. I'm also not buying that this is anything like reforging in WoW where you had to do it even to be ready to play the game. What ultimately matters is still team play and mechanical prowess in many situations for the characters that did benefit of animation cancel techniques. It was a quick and easy way to distinguish mediocrity from true proficiency. One could wonder if this is where a lot of our problems on ladder stem from. I mean, on the one side, the devs are trying to incentivize team play by making every player do the same thing for any hero respectively, with very little variety in playstyle so they can focus more on actually functioning as a unit. But simultaneously, we're playing in a system that is performance orientated because punishing the entirety of a team for one player underperforming makes no sense from a balancing standpoint. Sure, we're talking about little variance between Genji players in the same rating, but there are astronomical differences between a silver rank Genji and a Grandmaster rank one. So I can see how the performance orientation in a solo queue environment is necessary to uphold any level of balance. Of course, we can always question every individual decision they make, but I start to wonder if, in some weird way, when looking at a bigger picture, it might make sense. And this is where I would like to hand the discussion over to you guys in the comment section below. It's obvious that at this point I'm fairly indecisive as to what I am even supposed to think of the entire matter, so I'm looking forward to see what you guys have to say. But until then, this is me done for the day as I talk about the supposed depth of skill in Overwatch. Don't forget to drop me a like on your way out if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and if you want to keep the show going, consider sponsoring the channel for just $5 a month via YouTube Gaming. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time.